That little shiver you feel when the external world seems to wink at you, that is where our confusion begins. You mention a name that hasn't crossed your lips in years, and the telephone rings, and there they are, speaking that name back to you. You have a thought, a sudden, specific yearning for a forgotten melody, and the radio, which has been silent for hours, suddenly bursts forth with exactly that tune. We call this synchronicity, or perhaps fate, or sometimes just a bizarre coincidence. But the central paradox is this. You are attempting to catch yourself in the act of being the world. It is not a correspondence of two separate things lining up in time. It is the immediate, sudden realization that there was only one continuous thing all along, and you were trying to see the seams where there are none. We treat this event like a sign from outside, a celestial telegram delivered by a cosmic messenger. It feels important, doesn't it? But what if the sender, the receiver, and the message itself are simply sitting right here, sharing the same space, the same cup of tea? Before the event, before the external confirmation, there is often a soft restlessness, isn't there? A slight, nameless premonition that settles over the afternoon. It is not distress or anxiety. It is just a gentle weight, like the air thickening with humidity, right before the first drop of rain falls. This internal state is the subtle perception that we often ignore, the peripheral awareness that something is gathering momentum just outside the frame of our focused attention. I remember once just staring at the grain of a wooden table, feeling utterly blank, waiting. Nothing specific was happening, yet the texture of the wood suddenly felt profound, heavy with unspoken potential. And then the door opened, and the exact person I had been avoiding for weeks walked in, holding a book I had just vaguely thought about reading. This is the sensation that precedes the problem. It is the world breathing through you, not shouting at you, and the sensation is merely a tuning of the instrument before the concert begins. We immediately assign the wrong names to these internal symptoms and the external happenings. We call it fate intervening, or the universe guiding me, as if some external agency is pulling strings on our behalf. We turn a natural unfolding into a mystical transaction that requires our frantic interpretation. This is how society reinforces mistaken interpretations. It loves a good external oracle, something to blame or something to thank, rather than accepting responsibility for the whole show. You might say it's just statistical probability, the brain finding patterns where none exist, a trick of memory selecting only the hits and ignoring the misses. But notice this, the emotional weight, the sense of inevitability, the sheer shock of recognition, is far too heavy and too immediate to be explained away by mere numbers. It is not the universe telling you what to do. It is the universe being you while you contemplate the doing. Not guidance, but recognition. The mechanism starts simply, not with magic, but with consciousness. We assume the mind is a separate container observing reality through a window, but the mind is actually a feedback loop, continuously creating and receiving the structure it calls outside, participating fully in the field. The internal experience is one of resonant tuning, much like two musical instruments in the same room. Think of a tuning fork. When you strike one with a small mallet, the identical fork across the room begins to hum. Not because a message was sent across the distance, but because they are built of the same essential structure and share the ambient field of vibration. That feeling of synchronicity is just the moment you realize you are not a small, separate boat sailing on the vast ocean, but rather a wave that is simultaneously the water, the movement, and the temporary shape of the sea. The great mistake we make is trying to force it, to chase the next sign, or to demand proof from the cosmos. When you demand a sign, you are standing outside the event, treating the universe like a mystical vending machine of destiny that owes you clarity. Stop trying to collect celestial receipts. Where, precisely, does the world end and your awareness begin? The boundary is arbitrary, a conceptual fence we draw for convenience and sanity. When a synchronicity occurs, the fence simply dissolves for a moment, and you realize the pattern of your desire or your intention is the exact pattern of the world's unfolding at that instant. It is like looking in a mirror and suddenly realizing that the image you see is not a reflection of you, but simply the other side to you, inseparable from your physical presence. The distinction between subject and object is merely a grammatical convenience that we mistake for reality. The paradox that links everything is this: the more desperately you seek this alignment, the farther you push it away, because seeking implies separation, implies that the thing you need is somewhere else. True synchronicity happens when you are so completely present that there is no space left for the universe to send a telegram across the void. The message is already received before it is sent. If we are already the whole pattern, interwoven and complete, how do we stop trying to manage the edges of the tapestry? The primary emotional consequence of realizing this deep connection is the dissolution of loneliness. You realize you are fundamentally included in the scheme of things, built right into the architecture of time and space. This realization also shifts how you interact socially. You stop needing constant external confirmation from others, because the world itself confirms your presence simply by existing alongside you, mirroring your internal state. There is a profound shift in identity. You move from feeling like a small, isolated passenger in a vast, uncaring machine to feeling like the machine itself, temporarily wearing a small, specific hat. It happens in quick succession sometimes, doesn't it? You decide to take a long, complicated trip, and immediately the perfect, affordable accommodation listing pops up unbidden on your screen. Then, the specific book you needed to read for your current inquiry literally falls off the shelf at the library. And later that same day, a person you haven't spoken to in years calls with exactly the necessary piece of logistical information you needed to begin. The existential consequence is a sudden, quiet certainty. Not certainty about what will happen tomorrow, but certainty about the fundamental coherence and intelligence of being itself. You stop wasting precious energy on regret, because even the apparent mistakes and detours suddenly look like necessary movements in the dance, like an eddy in the river that eventually rejoins the main current. The conflict we perceive when we miss a synchronicity or feel out of alignment is not a defect in the system. It is merely a capacity we haven't yet noticed. We feel the heavy weight of missed opportunity, but that weight is just the inertia of our own unrecognized creative power. We often read these events as proof that we must be special, a chosen one, singled out for divine attention. But the real inversion is realizing that everything is special, and you just happen to notice your own participation in the spectacular commonness of it all. That gentle weight of premonition transforms into clear direction when you stop resisting the natural flow. It is the fundamental difference between trying to control the river and simply allowing yourself to float with the current. The seeker spends their life running frantically toward a distant light, believing they must exert incredible effort to find the truth hidden somewhere beyond the horizon. The found realizes that the light was shining from their own eyes all along, and the effort was precisely what kept them blinded to their immediate reality. We stop trying to control the reflection and just allow the mirror to be clean, clear, and unagitated. If separation is the illusion, then how do we practice radical inclusion in every single moment? When you see the world line up in a magnificent way, don't rush to interpret the message or frantically search for the next instruction. Just sit with the pure astonishment of connection. This is the moment for the quiet internal dialogue that changes everything. Ah, I see that pattern. No, don't grab it and try to catalog it. Just breathe and let the pattern complete itself. It is a moment of pure, silent alignment, where the noise of me needing to manage the outcome temporarily ceases. True consciousness is not about collecting data points of magic to prove the universe is benevolent. It is about dissolving the distinction between the mundane and the magical, recognizing that the most profound synchronicity is simply that you exist at all in this body, at this time, capable of noticing the texture of reality. The new understanding is that the universe is not speaking to you in complicated codes or riddles. It is speaking as you in the language of immediate felt experience. This clarity reorganizes your internal posture entirely. You stop waiting for external permission or divine confirmation from the outside world to launch your actions. Stop trying to predict the outcome of your actions, which is impossible anyway. Instead, simply notice the quality of the intention that launches them, the purity of the impulse. Allow yourself to be moved by the current rather than trying to move everything else by sheer force of will. When you live from this place of radical inclusion, every moment becomes synchronous, not because the events are rare and perfectly aligned, but because your attention is so wide and spacious that you are finally able to hold the whole picture. The posture shift is subtle but monumental. Stop trying to grab the thread of fate. Simply observe the tapestry. Stop insisting that the knot must be untied your way, or that the pattern must conform to your preconceived notions of what success looks like. Just notice how the threads, when left alone and allowed their own tension, often reorganize themselves into a more sensible, more beautiful pattern than you could have ever planned. This is not passive resignation, mind you, not X, but Y. It is not apathy or a spiritual excuse for laziness, but an active, dynamic listening to the deep resonance of the moment. We are so busy trying to force things, aren't we? We treat life like a stubborn zipper that must be yanked, when often just a slight adjustment of the fabric is all that is required for the teeth to align perfectly. The clarity that emerges is this: there is no such thing as outside the flow. There is only the feeling of resistance to the flow, and that feeling is simply the ego trying to maintain its illusion of independent control. When that resistance drops, even for a few seconds, you realize the world wasn't waiting for you to perform some heroic feat of willpower, or to decipher some ancient code written in the stars. The world was simply waiting for you to get out of its way. The moment you cease fighting gravity, you realize gravity is holding you up. It is like being a tiny drop of water in the ocean, believing you need to push the tides away from the shore. When you stop pushing, you realize you are the tide, moving with oceanic, inevitable power, and the entire ocean supports your movement without effort. What does this look like day to day? Really, it means you stop labeling the unexpected detour as bad luck and start viewing it as a necessary course correction, perhaps saving you from a much larger collision down the road. It means when you go to the store for milk and meet the exact person who can help you with your career pivot, you don't dismiss it as random chance. Or worse, ignore the opportunity because it didn't arrive via the proper bureaucratic channels you had planned. You notice the sheer efficiency of the universe operating behind the scenes. You allow that feeling of astonishment to settle without immediately trying to capture it and put it in a box labeled "Proof I am spiritual" or "My manifestation worked." The moment you try to capitalize on the synchronicity to control it or repeat it, the magic dissipates because you have reintroduced the separation. The moment becomes transactional and the feeling of intrinsic unity vanishes. Alignment, then, is not something you achieve through disciplined practice or endless searching, though those things have their place in clearing the mind. It is the natural state that occurs when you cease the misalignment. The invitation is always to allow. Allow the awkwardness of the pause that precedes a decision. Allow the uncertainty of the next step when the map dissolves. Allow the spontaneous convergence of events without feeling the immediate, frantic need to name it, monetize it, or repeat it for an audience. Just let it be what it is, the unmistakable sound of reality recognizing itself, a low hum of deep, systemic order. This new internal posture is one of profound trust. You are not trusting in an external deity or a vague cosmic benevolence that might change its mind tomorrow. You are trusting in the inherent intelligence of the system of which you are a fully functioning, indispensable part. When you decide to act from a place of genuine, unpolluted impulse, an impulse that arises from the whole of you, not just the anxious part of the mind, the world rearranges itself effortlessly to support that impulse, because your desire is no longer separate from the world's desire. It is the difference between dragging a heavy, ill-fitting chest across a rough floor and suddenly realizing the chest is on invisible wheels. and all you needed to do was guide it gently with your fingertips. This recognition, this ease, is the simple secret of living without unnecessary friction. It is the surrender of the personal will to the universal flow, not as a defeat, but as a recognition of superior wisdom. You stop trying to steer the massive ship of life with your tiny personal rudder. You simply notice the wind, trim the sail, and allow the ocean to take you where the physics of the world dictates you must go. And oddly enough, that destination is always precisely where you needed to be. And so, the great secret of synchronicity is that it isn't an occasional miracle interrupting a boring mechanical universe, like a delightful glitch in the matrix that proves there is something more. It is the fundamental, constant rhythm of reality that we only manage to notice when our internal static momentarily clears, when the noise of our own frantic striving ceases. The universe is not sending you cryptic messages from afar, using birds and license plates to communicate instructions. It is simply winking at itself, using your own perception as the lens through which it enjoys its own magnificent coherence. Stop chasing the signs, then. Stop trying to collect proof that you are connected, because the fact of your existence, the mere perception of your breath moving in and out, is the only proof required. You are the connection itself, the pivot point where the internal and external worlds perfectly intersect and become one continuous movement. Rest in that knowledge. There is nothing left to fix, nothing crucial left to find, and nowhere truly crucial left to go, because you are already home, already here. There is only this astonishing, perfectly organized moment, which, if you simply allow it to be, is always, undeniably, and completely enough.